Good evening. We're doing the lower orders. Just as the Western European middle classes were suspended in webs of state pa- pacrial, pacrialism, dang. See, pacrialism, dang it, bro. I just said that word too. Pac, oh, park, parochialisms, stated, okay. Don't sign in, bruh. Parochialism. Dang. Parochialisms, meaning a quality of showing interest only in a narrow range of matters, especially when those that directly affect yourself, your town, or your country. Narrow outlook or scope, relating to, okay. Confined or restricted as if within the borders of a parish. So too was the vast majority of European peoples, the lower orders, the class that ruled the nobility by its orchestration of the instrumentalities of the state, imprinted its character on the whole of European society. And since much of that character had to do with violence, the lower orders were woven into the tapestry of a violent social order. By the nature of hierarchical societies, the integration of the lower classes, wage laborers, peasants, serfs, slaves, vagabonds, and beggars. Doesn't that literally sound like right now, like America currently? It's like we can't get out of our past, bro. We can't leave it because we keep going and going and going, and it's like change the damn channel. Into the social, political, and economic orders of the absolute state was on the terms of the client of the latter. The function of the laboring class was to provide the state in its privileged classes with the material and human resources needed for their maintenance and further accumulation of power and wealth. Ay, Jesus, ay caramba. It's like, oh my God. Can we choose a different history channel? Like, I'm sick of this. This was not, however, a simple question of the dominance of the ruling class over the masses. The masses did not exist as such, as earlier Greek and Roman thinkers had created the totalizing constructs of the barbarians and feudal nobilities of Western Europe had inspired and authored a similar myth. Friedrich Hertz had reported that in the Middle Ages and later, the nobility, as a rule, considered themselves of better blood than the common people, whom they utterly despised. The peasants were supposed to be descended from Ham, who, for the lack of filial, I need to get a dictionary. I think this is like the third time I've said that. Filial pity. What is that? Oh.
This is said as filial piety. Filial piety. In American English, however, this is usually said as filial, same pronunciation here, filial piety. Filial piety in American English versus.
Okay. Filial piety. Wait. What does it mean? Virtue of honoring the elders in your family. So it was lacking that. They said, y'all don't have no respect. Okay, I posted a video and I don't know. Oh, okay. Was known to have been condemned by Noah to slavery. This is that idea. You know, Okay, so there's this like Bible verse. I think it was a slave Bible. Don't quote me. But it was saying that black people have to pay for their sins for because of slavery. And do you hear that connection of like, oh, you didn't respect your elders, now you're condemned to slavery. You committed a sin. Anyways, the nightly classes of many lands on the other hands. Wait, how many pages do we have left? Girl, then we get to chapter 2. Believe themselves to be descendants of the Trojan heroes who, after the fall of Troy, were set. And think about, have you ever seen that connection? Okay, I'm so sorry. The Roman Empire and how, like, man, oh, I think about the Roman Empire all the time. Okay. But think about that connection to, like, colonization and white supremacy and this, that, and the third. And then, you know, that's a whole different thought process. Okay, after the fall of Troy, were said to have settled on England, France, and Germany. The Western literal powers. You know how long we spent learning about the Greeks and the Romans in freaking high school? It was like, oh my god, change the damn channel. This theory was seriously maintained not only in numerous songs and tales of knightly deeds, but also in many scholarly works. It was a form of this notion that Count Garbenu revived in the mid-19th century, extending its conceptualization of superiority so it would include the elements of the bourgeoisie. And think about how race and class go like this. And how this is like setting up the basis for racialism, right? So they were saying like these people were lower orders, they are by blood lower orders, so that superiority, like this is like the how was this Western world as we know it, how did this form? And this is like that process of, oh, this is how it formed. One, it was racialism was embedded. Two, they already have the superiority complex oh, I'm yelling. It's because my vent. I need to open that. Let me stop going off on tangents. The nobilities of the 16th century, however, proved to be more circumspect about the masses than their genealogical legend might imply. They did not become victims of their own mythic creations. When it came to the structures of the state, their knowledge of the social, cultural, and historical compositions of the masses were exquisitely? I don't think that's the right word. Exquisitely. I think that's it, actually. I might be right. Exquisitely? Let's make sure. I really do need a dictionary. I told myself I was not going to buy more books, but I think that one's actually necessary. Where'd it go? Oh. Exquisite. Yeah, I was right. Refined. Perhaps this is no more clearly demonstrated than in one of the most critical areas of the state's activity, the monopolization of force. Bitch. The absolute state was a cause and effect of war. Its economy was a war economy. Dude, right now, the literal economy is a war economy currently to this day. You know how much money the freaking military industrial complex? Y'all. Its economy was a war economy. Its foreign trade was combative. Its bureaucracy administered the preparations and prosecutions of war. Such a state required standing armies and eventually navies. I said naives. Navies. But for certainly political and sometimes economic reasons, soldiers could not be recruited easily from, in V.G. Kieran's phrase, the mass of ordinary peasants and boogers. Think of us as peasants. You know how many Americans are like, no, I'm not fighting for this country. What do you mean? I want healthcare. I want free healthcare. I want free childcare. I want to go to college and not have to pay off these student loans while you're paying for what's over there and giving them free college and some and free healthcare and this, that, and the third. Like, what do you mean, America? So what America does is it goes to populations like people that are trying to get into the country and being like, hey, I think I may be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Hey, if you want to be a citizen, instead of waiting in that 10 years to become a natural citizen, why don't you fight for us and you can become a citizen? Or or you know how they said that if you have a certain IQ for the police force, like you can't become the police. Hold up. No. You know how like in high school, sorry, I'm trying to see if this it did post. Um you know how in high school like they have those military people come in, or yeah. And it's like you're recruiting from like recently propagandized students without their prefrontal cortex even being developed. Like, why were there military people trying to recruit children? The prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until 25. They can't even rent a car yet, buy alcohol. And you want them to fight for your country? Yup. Yup. Let's keep reading. Okay. Kieran puts the situation most simply for France, though it was the same all over Europe. Frenchmen were seldom eager to serve their king, and their king was not eager to employ the Frenchmen. Loyalty to the state of the monarchy from the exploited ranks of the lower classes was rare. And we all lower class at this point. I mean, I don't got no job, so I really don't know. In any case, not one state of the 16th or 17th century was reliant on such an identification between the masses and their rulers. The soldiers of the armies of France, Spain, England, Holland, Prussia, Poland, Sweden, and at first Russia were either alien to the state for which they fought and policed or very marginal to them. European governments relied very largely on foreign mercenaries. One of the employments for which they were particularly well suited was the suppression of rebellious subjects. Oh, right now, currently, it's like they copy and paste history over and over, and it's like, oh my god, change the channel, please. And in the 16th century, the age of endemic revolution, they were often called on for this purpose. Governments had to look either to backward areas for honest people, simple minded fellows, untainted by political ideas. Think about children, 18-year-olds, or foreigners, but just people in general that, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not even gonna say, like, I mean, there's obviously like benefits that come with joining the army. I'm not gonna say that like people are dumb. I don't think people are dumb. I think it's just like what access of information do you have? Like what type of access to information do you have? Sorry. Anyways, I'm more likely going to critique a system, even though I use examples in which people are working within the system. It's not a critique on the people. I don't think it should be a critique on the people because it's like, what do you expect? People are trying to live, to survive, but it's more of like, look at the system and what has this system bred, you know anyways, depending then on changing fortunes. But I need to be more clear about that myself, because sometimes I use too many personal examples or examples that people take on to reference the system without clearly defining that I'm not blaming people, like, you know what I mean. Anyways, but that's on me. Depending then on changing fortunes, the identities of the combatants, the geopolitics of war, and the mission, mercenaries were drawn from among the Swiss, the Scots, the Picardians, Bretons, Flemings, Welsh, Bequees, Mavarese, Gallowayans, Mations, Corsians, Burgundies, Gueldarians, the Irish, Czechs, Croatians, Magyars, and from Gasonia, Alguia, Norway, and Albania. Sorry. Since one function and result of the work of these mercenaries was the suppression of subject peoples, the degree of their success was directly indicated by their own absence. I wrote a note for myself: the miseducation of a Negro, mental enslavement. And then think about the ways in which, okay, that'll be a video for another day. From the indicated by their absence for the most part from the political geography of modern Europe. The absolute state, or its indirect successors, I do rewrite it in my book and highlight it sometimes. Yeah. The instrument that propelled them into prominence in the 16th and 17th centuries for France into the 18th century ultimately absorbed the autonomous sectors from which the mercenaries originated. In the armies of the 16th century, native recruits distributed among the foreign mercenaries were also chosen with an eye to minimizing the political and social risks of the monarchy and its allied nobility. In France, the army drew its volunteers from the least national, most nondescript types, the dregs of the poorest classes. Kieran informs us, in Spain, the hills of Aragon and the Basque provinces served a similar function. In Britain, until the mid-19th century, the Scottish Highlands were the most frequent sites of recruitment, and the Welsh soldiers' skills became legendary. Important as the formation of these armies was for the construction of the states that dominated Europe for more than 200 years, we must not be diverted from their more historical importance by the romantic richness of the social and political drama to which they contributed. Louis the 11th, XI, X is 10, I is 1, 11th. Louis the 11th's innovation, is that him? Because V is 5. X with the 1 before is 9. X. Yeah. In 1474, the organizing a French infantry without Frenchmen was revolutionary in scale, not in character. The tactic of composing armies from mercenaries and from marginal peoples and social strata extended back to the Middle Ages and earlier. Imperial armies, republican armies, bandit armies, invading armies, and defending armies, the armies of rebellious slaves, of nobles, and even the chauvinist medieval cities, all laid claim to, or incorporated to some extent, souls from whom they had at best few considerations in less intense times. More significantly, in reviewing this phenomenon for the 16th and later centuries, the point is not that mercenaries were recruited from outside and from among the too many words. More significantly, in reviewing this phenomenon for the 16th and later centuries, the point is not that mercenaries were recruited from the outside and from among those least secure internally. This is simply the best documented form of a more generalized pattern of structural formation and social integration. The important meaning is that this form of enlisting human reserves was not peculiar to military apparatus, but extended throughout Europe to domestic service, handicrafts, industrial labor, the ship and dock workers of merchant capitalism, and the field laborers of agrarian capitalism. There has never been a moment in modern European history, if before, that migratory and or immigrant labor was not a significant aspect of European economies. Let me make a little note. Okay. I couldn't reach my pen. It was on the ground. Sorry. Are we chill? Okay. This is not more widely understood seems to be a consequence of the conceptualization and analysis, the mistaken use of nation as a historical and economic category. As a resultant, let's restate that comment. That this is not a more widely understood. Come on, brain. That this is not more widely understood seems to be a consequence of the conceptualization and analysis, the mistaken use of the nation as a social, historical, and economic category, a resultant and persistent reference to national labor pools, e.g., the English working class, and a subsequent failure of historical investigation. Wallerstein, in his otherwise quite detailed study of the origins of the capitalist world system, can devote a mere page to this phenomenon, including a single paragraph on the ethnic divisions of the 16th century immigrant labor. And though compelled to acknowledge that not much research seems to have been done on the ethnic distribution of the urban working class of early modern Europe, he goes on to speculate that. Oh, Lord. Let's look up this word. Oh, I think that he worked on wait, let's try it. Kazmeshi Taimiki. I had a difficulty finding that, so I'm not going to even try. Taimiki's description of the systematic ethnic distinctions of rank within the working class. In the towns of 16th century East Elba is typical of the whole of the world system, world economy. Despite the paucity of studies, there are historical records that tend to confirm this view. Let me sit up a little. We discovered them in the Flemish cloth workers in the early 16th century London, and later in the 16th and in the 17th centuries, Huguenot refugees, about 40,000 to 80,000 of them, many of them hand-loom weavers fleeing France and settling in Spitalfields in London's East End, and thus establishing England's silk industry. Notice that? Like, even now to this day, how immigrants or people that are like refugees, for example, are like having to move to different parts of the world to work and build all this stuff. It's like that same thing over and over again. In the 18th and 19th century, Irish workers formed the core of the floating armies of laborers who built canals, the docks, and railways that transformed the face of England. And again in the European continent, as German farm workers and peasants were drawn to urban and industrial sectors of the central and western Central and Western Germany, Polish labor was used to fill the vacuum in Eastern Germany. France and Switzerland also recruited heavily from Poland, Italy, and Spain, and of course the formation of industrial corps in the United States before the Civil War located immigrant workers from northern Italy, Germany, Scotland, and Ireland, and after the Civil War from southern Italy and the lands of eastern, northern, and central Europe, Russia, Finland, Poland, Greece, and the Balkans. Perhaps the only unique aspect of Northern American industrial recruitment was the appearance of Asian workers beginning in the late 19th century from China, Japan, and the Philippines. We begin to perceive that the nation is not a unit of analysis for the social history. We can't look at things from nation. We can't be like, oh, just America, because what's America gonna say? Some American exceptionalist propaganda. What's the truth? What's the truth? Tell it to us now. I like doing that. We begin to perceive that the nation is not a unit of analysis for the social history of Europe. The state is a bureaucratic structure, and the nation for which it administers is more a convenient construct than the historical, racial, cultural, and linguistic entity that the term nation signifies. There's no detail. When we just talk about things based on nation, it's going to be very limited information. It's going to confirm what's, oh my God, I can see into my neighbor's, can I? It's either a TV or a fish tank. I will never pull my binoculars out to look. That'd be weird. The true character of European history resides beneath the phenomenology of nation and state. With respect to the construction of modern capitalism, one must not forget the particular identities, social movements, and the societal structures that persisted and or have profoundly influenced European life. If you want to get to the details, if you want to know what actually happened, you have to look at the people. You got to look at the social structures. Like right now, we have racism, sexism, this, that, and a thirdism, obias, and phobias that started with imperialism, capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then how did the people react? How did the people resist? How did people survive during these conditions? That's going to tell you the history, not the nation, not the state. They're going to tell you a lie, a bold-faced lie. That's what that said to me. Altogether, Western Europe had acquired a greater richness of forms of corporate life, a greater crystallization of habits into institutions than any known elsewhere. It had a remarkable ability to forge societal ties more tenacious than almost any other others apart from those of the family and its extensions, clan or caste, ties that could survive from one epoch to another and be built into more elaborate combinations, but along with fixity of particular relationships went no less radical. Come on, brain. But along with fixity of particular relationships went a no less radical instability of the system as a whole. European civilization is not a product of capitalism. On the contrary, the character of capitalism can only be understood in the social and historical context of its appearance. European civilization. I have a question about that I need to ask my smart friend. The effects of Western civilization on capitalism. The development of capitalism that can thus be seen as having been determined and formed by the social and ideological composition of the civilization that had assumed its fundamental perspective during feudalism. The patterns of recruitment for slave and mercenary we have reviewed held true for bourgeoisie and proletariats. According to Robert Lopez, in the Carolingian Empire, long-distance trade was dominated by Jewish people, and Italians. In medieval Europe, Lopez and Irving Raymond have documented the importance of Mediterranean traders at international fairs, and the development of foreign merchant houses in the towns of the hinterland. Ferdinand Brudel amplifies many financial centers, piazzas, Piazze, sprang up in Europe in towns that were of recent origin. But if we look more closely at the sudden and quite considerable developments, we shall find that there were in fact ramifications of Italian banking that had by then become traditional. In the days of the fairs of of Champagne, it was already the bankers from Siena, Lucia, Florence, or Genoa who held the money changer scale. It was they who made the fortune of Geneva in the 15th century, and later those of Antwerp, Lyons, and Medina del Campo. In short, throughout Europe, a small group of well-informed men, kept in touch via an active correspondence, controlled the entire network of exchange in bills or species, SPECIE, thus dominating the field of commercial speculation. So we should not be too taken by the apparent spread of finance, meaning it's the same thing over and over and over again. Only a small percentage of people own this mass amount of wealth and this and the third and blah, 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 blah. Excuse me. For Spain under Charles V from 1516 to 56 and Philip II 1556 to 98, the German Fuggers, the Genoese, and other international merchant firms organized the state revenues, exploited mines, and administered many of the most important estates. And in Constantinople, Genoese, Venetian, and Rugasian, bankers and merchants shepherded the trade and financial relations between Europe and the Ottoman Empire. For the Mediterranean towns of the 16th century, Brudel had observed the functions of the indispensable immigrant. To Salonika, Constantinople, and Verona, Italian and Spanish Jewish people, as merchants and artisans, brought new trades to further broaden an already multicultural bourgeoisie. There were other valuable immigrants itinerant, artists, for instance, attracted by expanding towns which were extending their public buildings, or merchants, particularly the Italian merchants and bankers who activated and indeed created such cities as Lisbon, Seville, Medina del Campo, Lyons, and Antwerp. And in Venice, the long report by the King K. Savi in January 1607 indicates that all capitalist activities, as we shall call it, was in the hands of the Florentines, who owned houses in the city, and the Genoese, who provided silver between them, controlling all exchanges. Just as Nuremberg had ravaged Bohemia, Saxony, and Silesia, Brudel asserts it was the Genoese who, I think I'm saying that word wrong, but I'm too tired to look it up, who blocked the development of Spanish capitalism. It was, too, the indispensable immigrant who complemented the urban proletariat, incapable of maintaining itself, let alone increasing without the help of continuous immigration. In Ragusa, it was the Morlachi. In Marseilles, the Corsians. In Seville, the Moriscos of Andalusia. In Algiers, the Argonauses and the Berbers. In Lisbon, black slaves, and in Venice, the immigrant proletariat was augmented by Romagnoli, Marchiani, Greeks, Persians, Armenians, and Portuguese Jewish people. The bourgeoisie that led the development of capitalism were drawn from particular ethnic and cultural groups. The European proletariat and the mercenaries of the leading states from others, its peasants from Okay. The peasants from still other cultures and its slaves from entirely different worlds. The tendency of European civilization through capitalism was thus not to homogenize but to differentiate, like literally right now. It's no melting pot. To exaggerate regional, subcultural, and dialectical differences into racial ones. As the Slavs became the natural slave, the racially inferior stock for domination and exploitation during the early Middle Ages, as the Tartars came to occupy a similar position in the Italian cities of the late Middle Ages, so at the systemic interlocking of capitalism in the 16th century, the peoples of the Third World began to fill the expanding category of a civilization reproduced by capitalism. As a civilization of free and equal beings, Europe was much of a fiction in the 19th century and later, as its very unity had been during the Merovingian Gaian, I don't know, Merovingin, and Carolingian eras. Both the Church and the more powerful nobilities of the Holy Roman Empire and its predecessor had been the source of the illusion of the earlier periods. From the 12th century forward, it was the bourgeoisie and the administrators of state power who initiated and nurtured myths of egalitarianism while seizing every occasion to divide peoples for the purpose of their domination. The carnage of wars and revolutions precipitated by the bourgeoisies of Europe to sanctify their masques was enormous. Eventually, however, the old instruments gave way to newer ones, not because they were old, but because the ending of feudalism and the expansion of capitalism and its world system, that is the increasingly uneven character of development among European peoples themselves and between Europeans and the world beyond, precipitated new oppositions while providing new opportunities and demanding new historical agents. The Reformations in Western Europe and then England that destroyed the last practical vestiges of transcendent unified Christendom were one manifestation of this process of disequilibrium. In England, as an instance, representatives of the great landowners and agrarian capitalism, in pursuit of their own social and financial destinies, disciplined first the church and then the monarchy and finally the masses through enclosures. The poor laws, debtors, prisons, transportation, in parentheses, forced immigration, emigration, and the like. The contrasts of wealth and power between labor capital and the middle classes had become too stark to sustain the continued maintenance of privileged classes at home and the support of the engines of capitalist domination abroad. New mystifications were appropriate to the times. New mystifications more appropriate to the times were required, authorized by new light. The delusions of medieval citizenship, which had been expanded into shared patrimony, and had persisted for 5 centuries in Western Europe as the single great leveling principle, were to be supplanted by race and, to the use of the German phrase, Herrenvolk, in the 17th and 18th centuries. The functions of these latter ideological constructions, which is Herrenvolk, were related but different. Race became largely the rationalization. Oh, it's still recording. Sorry. Okay, sorry, I have 5%. I need to charge my stuff. Race became largely the rationalization. Oh my god, almost done. Rationalization for the domination, exploitation, and or extermination of non-Europeans, including Slavs and Jewish people. And we shall have occasion in part 2 to explore its application beyond Europe and particularly to African peoples more closely. But while we remain on European soil, it is Herrenvolk that matters. In 18th century England, Reginald Horseman sees its beginning in the mythical Anglo-Saxonism, literally the basis for white supremacy, which that had flown as an ideological pennant by the Whig intelligentsia. In France, for example, Paul de Rapin, Toiras, and Montesquieu, and before them Francois Hotman and Count Henry de Bolivignars. In Germany, Herder, Fichte, Schleiermacher, and Hegel. In North America, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Bourgeoisie ideologists displayed the idea of heroic German race, the basis for Anglo-Saxon white supremacy. And the idea swept through 19th century Europe, gathering momentum and artifice through such effects as Sir Walter Scott's historical novel and Friedrich von Schegel's philosophical fables. Inevitably, of course, the idea was dressed in the accoutrement of 19th century European science, scientific racism. Herrenvolk explained the inevitability and the naturalness of the domination of some Europeans by other Europeans, though he reconstructed the piece back to front. Louis Snyder, for one, recognized the effect. Racialists, not satisfied with merely proclaiming the superiority of the white over the colored race, also felt it necessary to erect a hierarchy within the white race itself. To meet this need, they developed a myth of the Aryan or Nordic superiority. The Aryan myth, in turn, became the source of another secondary myth, such as Teutonism in Germany, Anglo-Saxonism in England and the United States, and Celticism in France. Then, in the 19th century, modern nationalism appeared. The emergence of nationalism was again neither accidental nor unrelated to the character of European capitalism had assumed historically. Again, the bourgeoisies, in particular cultures and political structures, refused to acknowledge their logical and systemic identity as a class. Instead, international capitalism persisted in competitive anarchy, each national bourgeoisie opposing the others as natural enemies. But as powerful as the bourgeoisie and its allies in the aristocracy and bureaucracy might be in some way, they still required the co-optation of their rational proletariat in order to destroy their competitors. Nationalism mobilized the armed might they be required to either destroy the productive capacities of those who they opposed. Literally right now. Sorry, I just like to point out connections. Or to secure new markets, new labor, and reproductive resources. Literally right now with Palestine, right now with Congo, Haiti, Sudan. Right. Ultimately, the uneven developments of national capitalism would have horrifying consequences for both Europe and the peoples under European domination. In Germany and Italy, where national bourgeoisies were relatively late in their formation, the marshalling of national social forces, peasants, farmers, workers, clerks, professional classes, the aristocracy, and the state, was accompanied by the ideological phantasmagoria of race, Herrenvolk, and nationalism. This component of violence in its time became known under the name of fascism. With the creation of fascism, the bourgeoisie retained the full range of its social, political, and economic prerogatives. It had the cake of the total control of its national society, an efficient instrument for expanding its domination and expropriation of the third world, and the ultimate means for redressing the injuries of humiliation of the past. Again, not unexpectedly, slavery as a form of labor would reappear in Europe. But this goes far beyond our immediate purpose. What concerns us is that we understand that racialism and its permutations persisted, rooted not in a particular era, but in civilization itself. Racism is literally rooted within Western society, just as capitalism, because it was like this. That's what it's saying. And though our era might seem a particularly fitting one for depositing the origins of racism, the judgment merely reflects how resistant the idea is to examination and how powerful and natural its specifications have become. Our confusions, however, are not unique. As an enduring principle of European social order, the effects of racialism were bound to appear in the social expression of every strata of every European society, no matter the structures upon which they were formed. None was immune, and as we shall observe in the next two chapters, this proved to be true for the rebellious proletariat as well as the radical intelligentsia. It was again a quite natural occurrence in both instances, but to the latter, the radical intelligentsias, it was also an unacceptable one subsequently denied. They denied the racism that persisted within the West. I think that's what that's saying. Nevertheless, it insinuated itself into their thought and their theories, and thus, in the quest for a radical social force, an active historical subject, it compelled certain blindnesses, bemusements that in turn systematically subverted their analytical constructions and their revolutionary project. But this is still to be shown. To that end, we will now turn to the history of English working class, since these workers were one of the centerpieces of the development of radical intelligentsias, of the notion of the proletariat as a revolutionary class. An inquiry into the effects of racialism on their consciousness forms in the next steps of the demonstration of the limits of European radicalism. Okay,